We examine the impact of the transatlantic slave trade on the continent of Africa. Slavery had a long-lasting effect on Africa. The effect seems to begin at the epicenter on the Gold Coast and then reverberate across the Sahara, the jungles, the savannas, and into the eastern trading centers, and then into the south. When the Portuguese arrived, Songhai was the major player in the West, having absorbed Ghana and Mali. But coastal empires like Songhai, who made trade deals with the Europeans, were the first to feel the impact of trading away their populations and losing their autonomy. European powers were quick to never let the coastal empires gain too much power, so that they would continue to rely on needing European guns and goods. Those nations sold their futures away and found themselves growing stagnant. The new power centers in Africa began to develop beyond the coastal empires in the interiors. These were kingdoms who did not have direct involvement with Europe, but still benefited from the trade coming from the coastal empires, returning trade through the coastal empires. In this way, they amassed guns that allowed them to centralize their control against neighboring tribes and states and would-be kingdoms. The military leader or the warlord became the new focus of control and power in Africa. They would yield power through the gun while expanding territory, establishing stronger protections and control over agriculture, but continuing nationalism through artwork. As the military leaders in the interiors rose to power, the older coastal empires, who were now protectorates of European powers, began to collapse. Songhai fell to a Moroccan invasion in 1591, and the Obas of Benin lost control of their people in the 1600s, slowly deconstructing into the 1800s when they finally fell to the British Empire. Behind them rose the new gun and slave cycled empires. The slave and gun cycle would have a deep impact on African history. The Ashanti took power in the Gold Coast by picking up the ethnic groups left from the fall of the Songhai and taking control of the gold and kola nut trade. They used guns to centralize 20 matrilineal-based Akan tribal societies under the authority of the Asantehane, who was moving to absolutism at the same time as Europe was moving to absolutism. They maintained power by trading slaves with the Europeans on the coast and Muslim traders on the Sahara into the 1820s. The Dahomey Kingdom developed in the crumbling parts of Benin. They used a massive army and guns to take over slave force from the Europeans, and then seized control of the slave trade in the Niger Valley. However, despite all of the changes, African art still flourished and became a major trading commodity with Europe, as the wealthy of Europe incorporated bronze, wood carvings, and woven cloth into their homes and palaces. Some African artists were even brought to the courts of Europe to work their wares. The Swahili region in the east was morphed from powerful trading city-states to plantation-based economies that heavily relied on slaves that were brought across the Saharan trade routes from the west. The Portuguese and Dutch settlements along the Zambezi increased the demand for Sudanic slaves, as did Islamic sultans in places like Zanzibar, where the sultan owned 4,000 slaves. Many traditional pastoral Bantus fled for the interior, where they formed isolated kingdoms around what would be named Lake Victoria. Slavery also threw North Africa into religious warfare between reformist Puritan Muslims and unpure believers.